I was standing on the 26th floor of the Jones Day office in San Francisco, looking out to Alcatraz. And I knew at that moment that I was in really big trouble. Trouble because about 6 minutes before I was looking out into Alcatraz, I had received word that I had failed a lie detector test. I chose to take this lie detector test for a number of reasons, including that I was delusional, somewhat insane, I think, in trying to convince everyone, my lawyers, myself, my family, that I was innocent of these charges. So I paid for this lie detector test. I tried to cheat my way through the exam and I failed miserably. And at that moment, I knew that I was in really big trouble. Well, all defendants at some point of the journey recognize they're in really big trouble. In this video, the first one in nearly 2 weeks, I'm going to cover why Elizabeth Holmes is in really big trouble as we go through her specific testimony, what she is saying, how is she responding. I actually had interest in flying up to San Jose to try to film this video from in and around the courthouse. Then I recognized there's no way they were going to let me into the courthouse, but that's okay because I've been to prison and everyone on our team has experienced this system. I don't need to be in the courthouse to provide insight that I think our team can provide because we've been through it and we know the consequences that follow making bad decisions and continuing to double down on bad decisions. So we're going to transition into her testimony in a moment. Before I do, thank you so much for your incredible engagement. Our last video crossed over 40,000 views, 40,000 views just in that one video. So thank you. Please like and subscribe and comment. And if there are things you want us to do better, and I know some of you leave comments on things that we can do better, I read them, I watch, I learn, the both good and bad, with the hopes that it provides incredible value to you. So thank you again. And let's dive in with Elizabeth Holmes' testimony and why I think she's in very big trouble. All right, so let's dive right in with the blog our team wrote at Prison Professors as we cover her testimony. But before I begin, I'm aware that she's already in big trouble. My goodness, she's been indicted. She's looking up to 20 years in federal prison. My point I'll cover in this video is specific things she is saying and doing, I think, prove how desperate their case is and how unlikely it is that she prevails. And it's why I think that the defense is throwing a Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, by having her testify, because all it takes is one juror to be sympathetic. As a reminder, one juror, one alternate, was dismissed because she said it would be hard to send a young mother to prison. So they're rolling the dice, so to speak, but they're also leveraging off her strengths. As executives, you got to play to your strengths. Well, what is the strength of Elizabeth Holmes? Well, some people would argue she was only able to raise money by deceit and fraud and treachery, essentially lying to people. There are a number of people that would say she was magnetic, she was smart, and she had a magnetic ability and she connected with people. So if that is a strength of hers, at least according to some, and if they know the odds of prevailing at trial are so low because the lion's share of defendants that go to trial lose, you can now see why she's testifying, because all she needs is one sympathetic juror to believe that it was Belwani, or she didn't have bad intent, or manipulations and puffery are very common in Silicon Valley. So given her history of raising money at such large levels and convincing people to work alongside her, very powerful and rich, influential people, her lawyers probably deduced, you might as well testify because all we need is one. Quickly, for some background, if you've been living under a rock, or unfortunately some of my friends who are in prison who don't have access to iPhones or the internet, let me give a quick summary of where we are in this case. As we know, Elizabeth Holmes is on trial, accused of multiple instances of fraud against doctors, patients, and investors in connection with her role as founder and CEO of Theranos that she started in 2003 after dropping out of Stanford. Interesting, in her testimony, she mentioned that she dropped out of Stanford in part because she had been raped, and that contributed to her dropping out of Stanford. A criminal defendant taking the witness stand will first testify on direct examination, meaning the witness is responding to questions from their own lawyers. I can assure you, having been in this space for 13 years, including having clients gone to trial, she spent hundreds of hours going through every possible scenario with her lawyers, every possible response. It was manufactured, it was well thought through, nothing caught her off guard. So that's how it starts, with her defense team asking her questions. Once Holmes' direct examination concludes, prosecutors will have ample opportunity to question Holmes in front of the jury. the cross-examination, to challenge her testimony and present her with contradicting evidence. Then there will be a chance for redirect examination of Holmes, again by her team. The purpose of the redirect is typically to give the witness another chance to explain their position on relevant matters under less pressure and more friendly reporting. Reportedly, during her time on the witness stand, Elizabeth Holmes has been making eye contact with the jurors. This can be very important for the defendant to connect with jurors. The goal for the defense is for the jury to see her as a human being. They're trying to shift the narrative. The government narrative from the U.S. attorney is she's a thief, she's a crook, she's a fraud, everything she did was under deceit. There's no way she could have built this business. She didn't have the skill set to do it. That's the government's narrative. That is their position. The defense certainly has a different narrative, which is she didn't have bad intent. It's not a fraud if a business goes belly up. These things happen every single day. And by the way, it wasn't even her fault anyway. It was somebody else's. So they're seeking sympathy. They're looking to portray her as an executive, as someone who has overcome a great deal of hardship, who was, and I know for many of you, you hear hardship and laugh, but I'm talking about hardship by way of Belwani and how difficult it is to thrive and succeed as a female entrepreneur in Silicon Valley. Again, this is her lawyer's narrative, trying to counter the government saying she is nothing more than a fraudster. Continuing, as I mentioned, Holmes will use this opportunity to show her charm, hoping jurors will see her as someone who just tried and she failed. And we all try in life sometimes. And unfortunately, some of us fail, but that ain't fraud and that shouldn't send you to prison. How are jurors going to respond to the testimony? Well, we're going to see. We're going to see soon enough. With that said, let's get into some of the specific things she said while on the stand, and I will offer my insights on those specific statements. So let's address some of the things she specifically said. Naturally, the defense has opened up her testimony by discussing how she was a true believer in this company, and they claim that it was within her right to rely on the doctors, the scientists, and people in charge of the lab. She relied on them, and therefore, because she relied on them, even though she was the CEO, because she relied on them, she shouldn't bear any criminal responsibility. I've said this previously. The reason so few CEOs in the mortgage meltdown of 8, 9, 10, and 11 went to prison is because they would say, I'm running a huge company here. I can't be responsible for what everyone is doing beneath me, regardless if she's on TV saying, I'm the CEO, responsibility, and the buck stops with me. She's on trial now fighting for her life, and they're going to throw out all angles. Holmes said on the stand that her team was always working to fix these bugs, or so she was told. And in the end of the day, the technology didn't work, and that's because she relied on the wrong people and they were unable to fix it. Specifically, she was asked who is responsible for the operational management of the lab, and she responded, Sonny Belwani. The clinical scientific decision-making, meanwhile, was the job of the laboratory director and laboratory leadership. Then the defense tried to go on the positive and talk about how could she have had any criminal intent? How could she have had any intentions to defraud if she didn't sell one share in her company? She said, I didn't want to. I believed in the company and wanted to put everything I had into it. So here's a bbig problem and why she's in such trouble. Think about some instances in your own life where you've had arguments or fights or things have gone awry and you have an issue with someone. Things begin to heal and you begin to make amends once you can finally say, I'm sorry, I could have done this differently. I accept responsibility for some bad decisions that I made. Elizabeth Holmes is unwilling to accept responsibility for anything. If she were to at least acknowledge on the stand, yes, I knew. Yes, that rests with me. Yes, I should have been more informed and paid more attention to what was taking place. She would get more credibility from the jury, because then at least they could say, finally, she's accepted responsibility for something. Instead, it's easier to blame everybody else, but then take credit if there's something positive, for instance, not selling any of her shares. But that doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't committing fraud. Why? A big part of her sales shtick could have been, I am such a believer in this company and have a billions of dollars in this company. I'm such a believer that I'm not even selling any of my own stock. So it's easy for her to say, if I was intending to commit fraud, why would I not sell any of my stock? That's her defense attorney's job to sell. Well, to the flip side, I know, having been in this space for 13 years, that it was a big part of her sales process to raise more money by saying, I'm not selling. You should invest and we'll do this and grow together. Testimony continued with Elizabeth Holmes talking about the relationship that Theranos had with the big pharmaceutical companies, including GlaxoSmithKline, Bristol Myers, Merck, Pfizer. And she gave the impression that these pharmaceutical companies validated Theranos's technology. There is one moment where she acknowledged wrongdoing. And frankly, she had to, because there wasn't gray. It was as black as white as can be. And that was her putting the Pfizer logo and then sending it out to Walgreens. And of course, putting the Pfizer logo on that piece of paper gave the impression that Pfizer validated their technology when they did not. She specifically said, I wish I had done it differently in this respect. I think this is a very big deal because you need intent for a conviction. And when her lawyers say she did not have bad intent, how could you not have bad intent when you put a logo on a piece of paper, which would then compel someone to do business with your company? In that case, she had to own it and accept it because there was so much evidence, placing her at the wrongdoing there. She frankly had no other choice. She should be doing more of that, frankly. She should be doing more of, I did this wrong. I could have done this differently. I'm sorry. Then her lawyers can say, see, she admits wrongdoing here, but not there. Instead, she continues to go down this path of blaming others. For example, they got into discussions with her lead lab scientist, Daniel Young, and she just simply said, yeah, it went bad, but it wasn't my fault. Daniel Young was responsible for the whole project. And again and again and again, there's this great quote from George Santayana, a philosopher, who said something akin to, those who don't understand the past are doomed to repeat it. She is continuing down this path of excusing, of blaming others. It isn't her fault. She's continuing to put herself in that situation. It's frankly why she's on trial. It's why she's looking at 20 years in prison. If I may stay philosophical, it was Nietzsche in 1851 who said, the value of something is not what you attain with it, it's what it costs you. Well, maybe she attains an acquittal, or maybe she gets some benefits from this, who knows? But what is it costing her? Her dignity, any semblance of responsibility, of doing the right thing, of acknowledging some wrongdoing. What is it costing her by continuing to blame other people and to not learn anything from bad decisions of her past? It's hurting others, those that love and support her, and it could lead to a very long time in federal prison. She had an opportunity to do things differently, because instead she just does what she's always done. Hence, Santayana's, doomed to make the same decisions from the past. When she spoke specifically about trade secrets, I had a tough time saying that one. Specifically, she said because they were considered trade secrets and intellectual property information, she couldn't disclose it. She couldn't discuss it because of counsel. And the use of third-party analyzers in that way was an invention. As we understood from our counsel, we had to protect it as a trade secret. If we disclose that information, we could lose our trade secret protection. It's utter nonsense. As I transition into the final testimony from Elizabeth Holmes, as she gets specifically into statements about Sonny Belwani and their relationship. So let's keep it going. Without question, the most impactful part of the testimony was when she discussed her relationship with Sonny Belwani, her former lover and 20 years her senior. She did address on the stand, as I mentioned in the opening, that she dropped out of Stanford in part because she was raped. She then addressed how following getting raped and then she met Belwani, the abuse continued both verbally and sexually. Belwani's lawyers adamantly deny this. They think it's sickening and tragic that she's going down this road and blaming Belwani. A number of experts see this testimony as laying the groundwork for the Bengali defense. Bengali has come to refer to someone who tried to dominate, manipulate, and control another with evil intent. In court, the Bengali defense is a legal strategy that portrays the defendant as a victim, a pawn in the scheme of a greater and more influential criminal mastermind. Again, they're going with all they got here. Specifically, Holmes testified that Belwani tried to take credit for Theranos' success and her skills as a leader. She said Belwani would say that he built me into who I was. After speaking with young women inspired by Holmes in May 2015, Belwani texted her, I have molded you. Belwani meant that he was responsible for people's admiration of her. The testimony delved into the personal and physical abuse Holmes said she suffered in her relationship with Belwani, including being told, I was a monkey trying to fly a spaceship. Holmes made notes of insults from Belwani, and she recalled the time Belwani said to her, I don't enjoy being in a company that's not going to win. So angry at myself for coming. Let's just say all of these things are true, and it's sort of a he said, she said. Let's just say they're true. none of it excuses her role in deceiving and lying to people to raise money. There are people, unfortunately, in this country who are addicted to drugs and have severe mental health issues. Our prisons are full of people with mental health issues who probably shouldn't be in prison. They should be getting treatment. There's somebody who robbed a bank because they were high on drugs and sick and drunk and mental health issues and tons of problems, yet they broke the law, they committed a crime, and they're in prison. A big part of what she's doing incorrectly, another big problem that she has, she's essentially mitigating on the stand. She's not really articulating why she's innocent because she was the CEO, and there's so much evidence where she says that the buck stops with me. I'm the CEO. What she's doing here is essentially she's mitigating. These things are relevant if she's convicted. If she's convicted at trial and as she prepares for sentencing, as she attempts to mitigate, all of these things are mitigating factors. If she was raped, if she was abused, if she felt she was exploited, these are all mitigating factors to try to get a shorter sentence. But they're not going to result, in my opinion or experience, in her getting acquitted. She's addressing mitigating factors, but nothing that she is saying excuses her role in raising money and having people lose money and saying things that aren't true. Regardless of what Belwani did, if he did it, it's wrong. Again, it will be a mitigating factor, but it does not excuse her conduct. Just like a judge would tell a person who robbed a bank, who was on drugs or had mental health issues, that yes, I empathize with you, that you have had health issues. You're a drug addict. I empathize with you, but you still broke the law. You still robbed a bank. I have to send you to prison. They're mitigating factors, but they don't excuse someone from getting convicted. The testimony continued. Holmes continued to try to distance herself from the day-to-day. I get a little worked up on these sorts of things because our prisons are full of people who did not have bad intent, who have mental health issues, who are still there for long periods of time. But many of them come to say, I'm sorry, regardless of having mental health issues. I'm sorry, regardless of being an addict. I want to do better. I want to become stronger, learning from their past. Those are the people that I admire. And I don't know, let me continue here. Holmes continued to try to distance herself from the day-to-day management of these laboratories, claiming she was not aware of any of the problems with Theranos' technology. She testified, of course, that she did not run the lab operations. Others were responsible for oversight of the scientific and lab issues. Her lawyer asked her, who was responsible for operational management? Sonny Belwani. Again, Belwani was in charge of the business parts of the lab. According to Holmes, Belwani tried to control her actions and personal life once they became involved. He told me that he didn't know what I was doing in business, that my convictions were wrong. Belwani even told her what foods to eat to make her pure and have the disciplined lifestyle necessary for success. I'm fortunate that my wife does not tell me what to eat, nor do I tell her what to eat. That would be weird and odd. They appear to have a weird and odd relationship, and frankly, I'm glad that I don't know them. Belwani criticized her personality and would get angry at her for being mediocre, telling her she would never be successful. He felt I came across as a little girl and needed to be more serious and pointed and not giddy in my interactions. Again, doesn't excuse her breaking the law. These are all mitigating factors. What she's doing on the stand is trying to mitigate the sentence if convicted. I don't find it compelling, or if a jury were to acquit her because her former boss and lover told her what to eat. God help us. Ultimately, Holmes lost faith in Belwani. She told the jury, he taught me everything that I thought I knew about business, and I thought he was the best business person that I knew. I think I didn't question him in that way that I otherwise would have. Continuing on, Holmes testified that she had thought Theranos had one of the best labs in the world. Before that, he wasn't who I thought I was, she said, referring specifically to Belwani. As to what impact Belwani had on her work at Theranos, Holmes answered, I don't know. He impacted everything about who I was, and I don't fully understand that. Again, this is just another golden opportunity for her to talk about perhaps how she was naive, and even when she thought he was doing things that were incorrect or wrong or manipulating her as the CEO of a billion-dollar company, a billionaire herself, she should have been able to find these things, find out if he was lying to her, manipulating her. After all, that's why you're the CEO. If not, you shouldn't have been in that position. You shouldn't have been a CEO. It's just so troubling for me to read and hear that she could even say, you know, I don't know, and I don't understand that. She's had years of lawsuits and settlements and pain and time alone to think about the impact that he had. That was a golden opportunity for her to share a very insightful and thoughtful answer with the jury. In fact, she simply said, I don't know. Holmes's trial testimony, we learned, conflicts with what Holmes told the Securities and Exchange Commission in 2017. Of course, Theranos settled, I think, for $700 million with the Securities and Exchange Commission. During the SEC deposition, she said, I'm the CEO, I'm the ultimate decision maker for the company. Of course, it's in her interest to say that to the SEC. It's civil, toothless. They're civil regulators, not criminal, and not responsible for putting her in prison. So it makes sense that she would give a different message to civil regulators than she would on the stand when she's fighting for her life. Holmes's testimony concluded by reinforcing her vision for Theranos and her belief in the company for the jury. I believed in the company. I wanted to put everything I had into it. As to the vision sold investors for Theranos' future, Holmes said her goal was to improve access to testing and medical data to catch diseases earlier and treat them more effectively. Lastly, when asked why she never sold her 50% stake, I touched on this earlier, valued at $4.5 billion. Despite board members urging her not to, she said she didn't want to. She confirmed that her shares in Theranos are worthless today. I'll close essentially with how I open. Defendants are in a lot of trouble, and many of them double down and make matters worse. I'm of the opinion Elizabeth Holmes would have positioned herself to a higher chance of getting acquitted if she were to at least acknowledge some wrongdoing, something that she did irresponsibly or even criminal, because then a jury could say, okay, she acknowledged doing this, yet do we want to send her to prison? Has she suffered enough? Has she been through enough? Has she endured enough? Instead, when you issue nothing but blanket denials and excuse, it upsets people and angers them, because in this country, you can earn a second chance. We do forgive, but not if we blame other people. And that's the path and the road that she's continuing to go down. And it's the reason where if she were to get acquitted, people would be apoplectic, they'll be angry, they don't feel as if justice will be served. And if she is acquitted, to her credit, she rolled the dice. It takes a lot of courage to go to trial despite the odds, though from the evidence that we're seeing, an acquittal seems unlikely. Thank you very much for following this new video. I hope you found value in it, and I look forward to returning soon with more videos on the Elizabeth Holmes trial. Be well, be safe. Happy holidays. Bye-bye.